Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space. Hope you enjoy. Standing, Unbalanced, and Human Specialty. Written, HFY. Wargame Tournament, Old Desia, Only Galactic Year 3698. Jack turned to Liliac, a large grin in his face. Told you we would meet in the finals, and he met us spot on. Liliac was smiling too. Her friend was definitely the only worthy opponent in the room. She started to set up her troops on the tactical map table where the match would go. Best of 3, as usual. She could not resist the urge to send a little taunt towards the overjoyed human. Your feat is much more impressive knowing you're playing Terrans, one of the, if not the weakest faction. Maybe you're not all about unjustified patriotic pride. Didn't even drop a match, replied Jack smugly. Going for a perfect run, you see. Well, not sure if your pathetic human troops could even scratch my tactical genius of a meta-faction anti-meta units. Trying to grab both of 2 worlds will cost you greatly, warned your friend. You're about the best matchup I could ever hope for. The back and forth of friendly bantering continued for a moment while the judges checked the miniatures once again, and commentators went about the general details of the match. Soon, all the figurines were on the spot, electronically linked to the table and screen. Little circles appeared around the base, representing life and morale. It was the essence of the game used technology to ease processes, but never replaced the joy of handling your own miniatures or rolling a bucket of dice when attacking the enemy. As the battle started, the strategies from both factions became apparent in a few minutes. Terrans were all about striking deep and fast from heavily defended spots, with few but individually high-valued troops. Vernal, Liliac's faction, were the newcomers of the wargame and the fictional race created to have a purely evil antagonist. Their balance was annoying, given that they were the first faction to feature a sub-usual conventional damages but heavy morale damage and resistance. They were from a large margin of the kings of the game in its current version, even being arguably the best way to counter themselves. Liliac used her troops to destroy enemy morale, hence debuffing all stats and units falling quickly despite lacking firepower on her side. She knew Jack was up to something when she saw that he was running only half of the allowed 5k worth of unit points in his army, not even the reverse troops. He played with such a disadvantage that there was no way that he would have won all of his previous matches from sheer luck. She had to admit that he was a tactical monster, cleaning her troops despite the obvious handicap of power starved off meta-faction. But the morale breaking point of this last few units were almost reached, and she was still 2k in the lead, pretty much 5 times what remained of the Terran troops. She turned to her friend and opponent and asked, Okay, time to stop toying with me. Hit me with your real plan. Jack shrugged, an apologetic smile on his face. I needed the setup. Start of my run, I used the Terran-only battle tactic. Last stand. Some comments went on about his soon-to-be loss, and the commentators checked the rules about this poorly known tactic. Jack casually explained it to his best friend. Well, upon the right conditions, it means that my army gets a morale immunity and subtracts 1 to each attacking roll towards it, and can re-roll once each attack roll it makes. Liliac's eyes opened wide as the realization of the consequences washed over her. His few remaining troops were basically immune to everything that she could throw at them, except for the few heavy tanks that she sacrificed early in the battle. This round was a loss. Had she not chosen the armored walkers as a way to accurately kill high-value targets in mirror matchup, she would be defenseless against the trick for the next round. At least, she now was warned and could plan accordingly. Liliac was ecstatic. The 3rd round had been such a fantastic game, maybe the best she'd ever played. All out, close as hell. She had won despite a renewed use of the last stand. Still, she had to taunt her friend a bit, who had been one unlucky roll away from crushing her hopes. Say what you want, that tactic is unbalanced as feck. I'm kind to think the balanced team gave it to you Terrans only because they sucked too much without some kind of backup plan, and they will suck, to be fair. That's just called realism, corrected Jack with an obvious racial pride and bitterness from the loss. And, my sucker still came close to kicking your rear. with only half an army. You think I didn't get it? Taunted Liliac, throwing an arm around the shoulders of a friend, putting him close. You get an easy-to-trigger last stand, less cascading morale damage from my troops killing your army, and can be a little more comfy about the timer in the early turns because you have less units to handle. Jack let out a sigh and surrendered. Okay, you got me. Too bad luck was on your side. Come on. We get to go together to Galak Core next year for the real tournament. Don't be such a bum about a little loss. You were against me. She let out a warm laugh, her face slowly turning into a predatory expression. She let out in a trailing and suggestive voice, unless it was about our little bet. Some red appeared on Jack's face. She definitely understood him really well. Shooting range, Odysseus, late Galactic Year 3698. Fine, welcome everyone to your match awaiting crash course on weapon handling for civilians. I am Skycrasher, and I'll be your caretaker for the week. Don't expect to be able to take this training to the front lines, but it should be enough for you to not shoot your neighbor in the unlucky case the Feckers ever drop on Odysseus. And maybe even prevent them from, and I quote, freeing your body from the shackles of your biological mind. The instructor glanced at the group in front of him. As himself, a large majority were humans, the only dumb enough to colonize a planet close to the uncharted border of the Confederation, and in the present days the battlefront between the Confederation and the Ek. As a totally unexpected coincidence, uncharted space and unknown aggressive civilizations tended to go together exceptionally well. Among the trainees, Jack and Liliac waited for him to continue his summary. They didn't like the idea of staying this close to a war, but the alternative wasn't great either. The genocidal corpse-stealer space robots known as the Ek weren't making distinction between military and civilian spaceships, and some rumors told them believing that biological minds couldn't handle space. So unlike the planetside battle, where they spent great care to not fatten inhabited districts for them to get their bounty of prey to rescue, they just blindly destroyed everything that they ever found floating in space, and they were really good at it. In a few months, the Confederation's Navy should be able to contain them, being themselves incredibly good at destroying stuff in floating space. But it was still a distant victory. Distant enough for the Ek to invade new planets and replace the inhabitants' brain by their own pseudo-sentient device. Not only did the defeat be a gruesome spectacle, it expanded the strength of the enemy. The instructor grabbed his rifle, went on with the formation. Okay, so first let's talk about rules, about gun safety. These are the 4 that you should engrave deep in your brain. The first one is barricades in the Western Bridge, Odysseus, Galactic Year 3699. Liliac looked around. Everyone was in a bad shape, either soreness or something deeper in the soul. Even Jack looked shaken from the horrors of battle. Their militia platoon just came back from a support operation to the military troops near the Ek landing point. When the engagement took a bad turn, they were ordered to follow back the Skycrasher to the city and prepare to defend the position. What they saw made them hope the military would catch every single one of the Ek that came their way. What they faced was worse than what the few pictures and videos filtering from the previous battlefields showed. There was nothing that could prepare seeing legions upon legions of monsters whose appearance are as close to normal inhabitants of the Confederation, but with strange mechanical manners, random clothing, and strikingly similar scars around the head. Creatures from the uncanny valley, wearing the bodies of the lost. Creatures without emotions, but holding good old machine guns. Little armor, only an unending tide of bodies killed and raised again and again as an unnatural alliance of flesh and metal. Skycrasher cringed, receiving a transmission from the front lines. Clapping his hands, he instantly got the attention of the 200 militiamen. Ladies, lads, they got our artillery with an orbital strike. The infantry still fight and is slowly repelling them, but they couldn't stop the strike force from piercing the line and heading towards us. Knowing the Feckers, they'll try and create more of their aberrations from the civilians in the shelters. If they get to them, there's no stopping the tide. We have to cut them down here and now. There was despair, abundant in some of the glances exchanged behind the de facto leader. They were little more than glorified civilians themselves. Jack still stood, swallowing the paralyzing fear. How many of them? Little less than 3,000, let out Skyscraper, his shoulders drooping a millimeter. Wounded, slower, but still a little more than us. The comments were audibly defeatist now. Even Liliac felt that there was nowhere close up to the task. She grumbled, "Last stand is supposed to be a bit more glorious." Vague approval came from around her. However, her words ignited a spark in the heart of Jack. Still standing amongst the lying and emotionally defeated, he started. "It is not a last stand. It's the lost shield. We're the last shield for them." His hands pointed towards the city, the shelters. "We're the last shield of the weak, of our children, of our parents." Silence came back for a couple seconds. Then a second voice rose from another barricade. A second human stood up. "We are the last shield of my daughter, my son, and my soon-to-be grandson." A third voice came up, a third human rising from the silence of the doubt. "We are the last shield of my grandma, and the pretty clerk, and the noisy neighbor." One after another, voices came to life, the spark reaching both humans and aliens, growing in their hearts, until everyone was standing, proud, ready, almost eager to defend what they loved most. Skycrasher let out a thunderous voice, roaring his defiance. "We are not a sacrifice, as we will survive this day. We are not to buy time, as we are the reinforcements. We are not to cower in fear, as we are the light in the darkness." He inhaled profoundly and let out a battle cry. "We hold hope, and we bring death." A single roar came back from the 200 blazing voices. "We hold hope, and we bring death." When the Ek came into view, what was supposed to be an impoverished unit turned to a deadly bunch. They shredded the first wave in a matter of seconds, almost every shot finding its mark in an unsuspecting enemy troop. The defenders were fighting backwards, going from barricade to barricade every time the dead bots came too close and started to get accurate targets on their hiding spots. Every time they hopped back, Skycrasher would call again, and everyone would answer, "We hold hope, and we bring death." Liliac was proud, as she counted her 7th kill. The Ek were paying an unhealthy blood price for their advance. However, the militiamen weren't getting out unscathed. She didn't want to know how many of them got gutted by an unlucky volley. She fell back, sprinting ahead of Jack and Skyscraper, taking cover behind the next obstacle. The soldier was still defiantly claiming, despite the enemy, despite the odds, despite the world itself, "We hold!" Oh! The battle cry stopped as his head exploded in gore. The militia fell silent, including Liliac, and they stopped firing. Again, the insidious doubt was there. Would she come back alive? Was it really the last stand? Then a new voice came, younger, well-known. She turned towards Jack, seeing him shoot another Ek reaching over the barricade. Again, alone, he claimed, "We hold hope, and we bring death." Exultation came back. Whatever the odds, they would live through the day. She adjusted her rifle, shot her 8th kill. All around them, answers came flowing in. "We hold hope, and we bring death." War Games Tournament, Galactic Core, Galactic Year 3700. I am dumbfounded the meta hasn't changed in 2 years. Even worse, players found a way to even be more obnoxious with the Vernil despite the patches, complained Liliac. "Still, we're already top 8, and I doubt that we'll stop there," soothed her Jack, sliding his hands into hers. Another competitor, visibly angry, moved towards the couple, leaving the side of the judge. Jack chuckled, then explained to Liliac, "My former opponent, who calls himself Vernal God, metaplayer, sent back home crying." Said Vernal God came to stop next to them, glaring at both. He snapped, "Abuser, you only won because your fucking last stand tactic is unbalanced as feck. I just filed a complaint to the judge so that it can be reworked to be a bit more realistic." Jack Liliac exchanged a glance, and he stepped back a bit. She asked, trying to stay neutral in front of the sore loser, "I can only agree with your assessment. It is nowhere near what I saw." Vernal God seemed a bit surprised, but she would agree. but started to complain happily. Yes, you see, there is no way in hells that these puny 100 super soldiers could take down my 5,000-strong swarm force in a real battle. Something clicked in his mouth. Wait, you said, what you saw? Yes. I lived through the human, not called Last Stand, but still one, with Jack. She pointed at him. Oh, I didn't expect him to date military personnel, commented Vernal God. Or be one himself. Ex-militia, corrected Liliac. Jack, how would you rate the Ekdead bot? Pretty much the same as the Vernal Swarm Spawn, near 1 point unit, shrugged Jack. And both militiamen and super soldiers? Super soldiers are rated at 40. For the army I'm playing, I'd say that's all right. For a militiaman, he stopped for an instant, a finger on his chin, making a show of guessing. Now I'll be utterly generous and say 5. So to sum it up, Liliac turned back to Vernal God. You just lost simulated battle with something like 4K against 5K points. The battle we lived through. She grabbed Jack's arm, pressing herself against him, was closer to 1K to 3K if generous, probably 500 to 3K. Bullshit, is the only word uttered by Vernal God. Well, look up the tale of Skycrasher when you have time, suggested Jack. To come back to the matter at hand, I agree that the Last Stand tactic is utterly undervalued in the game, grinned Liliac. I already sent a demand for it to be reworked, and to be reworked to its real value. Nice to see that I have backup. Almost fuming, Vernal God started to back away. He spat back. Don't dare hope things will go your way. The demonic smile appeared on both the faces of the couple. Without further consultation, they simply dropped a trilling tone. We hold hope. And we bring death. End of story. I would just quickly like to thank the T5 channel members and patrons. Caspar Arnholtz, Cam Maxwell, Parky, It's Difficult to Pronounce, Lord Azrakul, and Arcadian.